There are certain basic elements that define life here on planet Earth. In general, we humans need air to breathe, water to survive, and we need facts in order to win arguments. The vitality of facts may not be among the essential elements of life on another planet within our galaxy, planet Cheney. The former vice president reemerged yesterday after weeks in presumed orbit somewhere to give an interview on Fox News, offering his response to the just-released CIA report, which concluded that we don't really know how effective torture was. Or, if you reside on planet Cheney,
I think the evidence is overwhelming that the EITs were crucial in getting them to cooperate, and that the information they provided did in fact save thousands of lives and let us defeat all further attacks against the United States.
The evidence is overwhelming. I think so. You know, the actual evidence at hand from the CIA review of the torture program in 2004 doesn't say that at all. Quote, there is limited data on which to assess their individual effectiveness, talking about enhanced interrogation techniques. In the case of Abu Zubaydah, who was waterboarded 83 times in 1 month, the CIA says, quote, it is not possible to say definitively that the waterboard is the reason for Abu Zubaydah's increased production, or if another factor such as length of detention was the catalyst. But on fact-free planet Cheney, that counts as overwhelming evidence. That issue of Abu Zubaydah's interrogation led to another fact-free but still ironclad Cheney assessment.
It shows that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Abu Zubaydah provided the overwhelming majority of reports on al-Qaeda. Both of them were uncooperative at first, that the application of enhanced interrogation techniques, specifically waterboarding, especially in the case of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, is what really persuaded him he needed to cooperate.
So says the transmission from planet Cheney. You know, if only we could hear from someone who was actually there at that Abu Zubaydah interrogation. If only we could hear from, say, the FBI agent who first interrogated Abu Zubaydah. If only he could tell us what actually happened there.
When we interrogated him using intelligent interrogation methods, within the first hour, we gained important actionable intelligence.
You say on the instructions of the contractor, harsh techniques were introduced, which did not produce results as Abu Zubaydah shut down and stopped talking. Correct?
Correct, sir.
Oh, enhanced interrogation techniques made him shut down and stop talking, says the man who was there. Back here on planet Earth, the facts about that interrogation are the exact opposite of news from planet Cheney. You know, even in an interview that was so softball that conservative blogger Andrew Sullivan denounced it as, quote, a teenaged girl interviewing the Jonas Brothers, Fox's Chris Wallace did manage to ask Mr. Cheney if he was okay with torture techniques that went even beyond those that were purportedly legalized by the Bush lawyers.
This Inspector General's report, which was just released from 2004, details some specific interrogations, mock executions, one of the detainees threatened with a handgun and with an electric drill, waterboarding Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 183 times. Do you think what they did was wrong?
It was good policy. It was properly carried out. It worked very, very well.
So even these cases where they went beyond the specific legal authorization, you're okay with it?
I am.
I am. So even though they went through the motions of trying to make some kinds of torture look legal on planet Cheney, feel free to ignore even that cubic zirconia imitation rule of law. Planet Cheney is always fascinating, but it also continues to be the source of the major voice of the Republican Party on national security. His only competition for that role is probably his own daughter now, who frankly says all the same things that he does. And the fact that Dick Cheney continues to be the voice of opposition to accountability for the torture years is probably the greatest political gift there could be for those of us who do want that accountability. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine, whose article on the Church Committee that investigated secret government activities after Watergate is this week's cover story on The Nation. Chris, thanks very much for making the time.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Do you agree with my premise here that Cheney is the voice of the opposition to really investigating what happened in secret in the Bush years?
Absolutely. I mean, the remarkable thing about Cheney is how unapologetically, impolitically evil he is, right? I mean, he doesn't, there's no hedging, there's no mincing, and when Chris Wallace says, well, what about these mock executions, which exceeded even the criminal allowances that your regime made for torture, what about those? He says, I'm fine with that, which, you know, what if they'd actually carried out actual executions? What if they had actually killed the children? What if they had, as John Yoo assented to in a House Judiciary Committee testimony I saw, ordered someone to crush the testicles of a child of a detainee? Apparently, all of this is fair game for Cheney. I just think it shows just how insane his vision of national security and constitutional governance are.
Your cover story in The Nation this week is essentially a call for a wide-ranging inquiry, not at all like what's been announced from Attorney General Eric Holder, this very specific, narrow look. You're calling for something like the inquiry after Watergate that gave us the presidential ban on assassinations and the whole modern structure of congressional oversight for intelligence. Yeah. Cheney was in government while the Church Committee was happening. What did he think of it then?
It's interesting. It was, I think, one of the key sort of defining traumas of Dick Cheney's political life. I mean, one of the things that happened during the Bush administration was, you know, they were incredibly secretive and they had just obvious contempt for Congress. And there were people who said, well, here's a guy, Dick Cheney, who served in Congress. How can he loathe Congress so much? And I think a lot of it goes back to what he saw during the Church Committee, which was, frankly, the Congress of the United States wrenching back some of the power, a lot of the power that had been taken from it throughout the Cold War. And he has given these interviews in which he's sort of ruefully talked about it being the nadir of executive power. And the fact of the matter is he's someone who's an executive power absolutist. And watching this happen, as he was the chief of staff under President Ford, and this kind of sea change was taking place, and he was watching it up close, I think that was kind of a key trauma for him. And it inspired a kind of commitment on his part to make sure that if he was ever back in the White House, they would regain the executive power that he saw lost there. And
so we're now in a situation with Cheney being the foremost voice against investigating the Bush years. We're sort of back to Church Committee v. Cheney. The question is whether he's going to win this time, and he lost the last time around. Last question for you, Chris. The Democrats' political argument against a big investigation is that this president would rather spend his political capital on stuff like health reform and climate change, and this is something that would be nice to clean up, but it would eclipse everything else this White House wants to do. The opportunity cost is too great. What do you think about that argument?
Well, I can understand its plausibility. I don't think it's a crazy argument, but the fact of the matter is, as self-consciously practical as that argument is, it's proving wildly impractical to implement. And the reason is the White House has defined any news about the torture regime or what happened in the last 8 years as a distraction. And therefore, by their own definition, when there's any news, it's distracting. It's a distraction. If there was some sort of comprehensive inquiry put in place with a target date to release a report, what you would do is you would corral all this into one place. You wouldn't have this oscillating news cycle in which every week or two there's a new revelation and bookers across Washington, D.C. rifle through their Rolodex to see what Cheney they can get on television to, you know, to apologize for torture. You would actually have some sustained inquiry that would put all this in one place. I actually think it would be politically beneficial to the White House for something like that to take place, because what they're doing right now just isn't, it's not working morally, it's not working constitutionally, but it's just not working practically politically.
Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. It's a great cover story. Thanks very much for making time to talk to us about it tonight, Chris.
Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate it.